Now that's what I'm talking about. Week 4 finally brought us a week with a ton of points, a lot of new names that you should be interested in on the waiver wire, and not too many injuries. Of course, we couldn't get away without any, and there are a couple that might be serious. So let's go through the injury report and then figure out who the top replacements are and who you might want to stream, because don't forget, bye weeks are finally here. Let's start out with the Colts game, because the very first injury that mattered for fantasy was quarterback Anthony Richardson. And I know, here come all the doubters, all the people who are saying it was just a matter of time, right? He even knows it, said it himself, he hears it, right? He's injury prone. This was just bound to happen. All right, fine, I guess you're right. He did get hurt, and, this was on a running play. This is how he plays. I guess it's going to happen sometimes. And so sure enough, Anthony Richardson left early in the game with what's called a hip pointer. He says he's good to go. He doesn't seem like it's a big deal, but it's still going to be a day-to-day situation. We're going to have to check how he proceeds throughout the week in terms of practice reports. And you know what? They might want to sit him out for week 5 because they are lucky enough or smart enough that they got Joe Flacco as their backup. And of course, Joe Flacco did what Joe Flacco does. He came in and he dealt 168 yards, 2 touchdowns, and led the Colts to a victory. Honestly, I'm kind of selfishly hoping AR sits and that we can get a chance to stream Flacco, especially on the teams where you do have Anthony Richardson. You might have benched him this week. I hope you did bench him this week because he gave you nothing. Look, AR has not even been good this year. 3 touchdowns passing to 6 interceptions, and he's supposed to make up for it on the ground. Only has 1 rushing touchdown so far. Richardson might go in week 5, but again, I'm kind of hoping he doesn't. But an even bigger deal was late in the game. Jonathan Taylor went out with what's now being called a mild high ankle sprain. That doesn't sound good. Of course, the mild part is good. High ankle sprain is scary. So they're kind of brushing this off as well, kind of making it sound like he's fine, saying it's okay, whatever that means. Look, Jonathan Taylor's out. That's a huge deal. Didn't really make a big deal about it during the game. Didn't know he was hurt. Just saw Taysom come in for a series. And of course, that's the backup. That just makes sense, right? Even a guy like JT does need a break sometimes. But apparently he did hurt that ankle. So definitely want to keep a close eye on this. Next week, the Colts have an important, for them, and a somewhat important divisional game against the Jaguars. But it's also a very good matchup for the Colts in terms of that Jags defense. Jags can't even buy a win these days. And he was off to another really good game, 108 total yards and a touchdown. So you definitely don't want to be without JT this week. Let's hope that's not the case. Taysom, of course, is the direct backup. Not a one-to-one replacement, I'll say, but if you are the JT owner, it might be worth picking up Sermon. All right, now the big one. Again, as of right now, it's not official, but it doesn't sound like it's anything good for Rashee Rice. In fact, all we got out of Andy Reid during the game from a reporter was, it's not good, right? And Rashee Rice is feared to have torn his ACL. Season might be over. Just like Hollywood Brown, who may technically come back, but let's face it, he's basically done for the season. That leaves Xavier Worthy as the number 1 receiver. Look, Xavier Worthy did cash in on a big play, but he cannot be the leading target for this team every single week. Travis Kelce finally woke up. Is there someone else who can step in this receiving core? Well, it's not Sky Moore. Sky Moore did, just because out of necessity, draw a couple of targets. His very first one was a drop, right? Sky Moore is not happening. Justin Watson is the only other receiver who caught a pass in week 4 after Rice went out. In a deep enough league, sure, you're now facing a bye week and without Rice, Justin Watson might be the play, but this is still kind of a desperation play. This really makes you wonder, are the Chiefs now in the market to trade for a receiver midseason? They might have to. Either way, wait till it's official, but Rashee Rice, very sadly, might have to be dropped pretty soon if he is out for the season. This is a guy who was a top 5 fantasy receiver already quarter through the season, 4th in receiving yards before going down. And of course, the worst part of this all, if you did see the replay or the highlights, is that he was injured by Pat Mahomes himself. And if you weren't surprised by Anthony Richardson getting hurt, you're probably less surprised by Christian Watson finally succumbing to injury. Now, it was not the hamstring. He's been good. Remember, all throughout preseason. Didn't miss a single practice. Hadn't missed a game. And now he left. This time it's an ankle injury. We'll see exactly how severe this is. There is some fear this is a high ankle sprain, so it could be a couple of weeks. Just get used to it. Life without Watson. You already knew the risk. If you did invest in Dontayvion Wicks, probably more likely in best ball, but possibly in redraft dynasty, or maybe just been eyeballing him. Now you're going to have to fight for him on the waiver wire because Dontayvion Wicks stepped up huge with Watson out. 2 touchdowns on the day, and with Jordan Love in his return, threw for a ton of yards. Mostly garbage time, sure, but Dontayvion Wicks was definitely the beneficiary, and he led the team with 13 targets. Now, of course, Jaden Reed had a big game, but Wicks was actually targeted more. So there, go ahead and get Wicks whether you had Watson or not. And then miraculously, we pretty much came out unscathed in the tight end front. Now, George Kittle did leave temporarily, go to the blue medical tent with a rib issue after that touchdown that he caught, that really impressive touchdown. But he did come back. It might be a little bit sore, so of course we want to check with Kittle especially. He's missed a lot of time here and there. But for right now, it seems like Kittle avoided anything major. And then naturally, the guy you didn't start who scored 2 touchdowns is none other than Taysom Hill. And just like the last couple of weeks, Taysom Hill might miss time again with another injury. This time it's an abdomen. Yeah, that's just how it is with Taysom Hill. All right, now let's get to those top waiver wire pickups that you want to go for this coming week. Remember, you got 4 teams on bye, so more important than ever that you are active on waivers. Also want to tell you that this is still a good time to sign up for Underdog because you're looking at the Thursday night matchup, the Bucks and the Falcons. Kirk Cousins just needs 1 yard, and you win this free pick'em if you sign up right now for Underdog. Take that free pick. It's Kirk Cousins getting 1 yard. You get this if you sign up for Underdog for the first time and use code ENDGAME. That's right, code ENDGAME when you sign up, and that also gets you the deposit match of bonus cash up to $1,000 along with the free picks, and they always have promos for their current customers. So definitely time to check out Underdog if you haven't already. All right, let's start out with the Colts. Obviously, a couple of big injuries there. Let's kind of see how that goes. But even regardless of whether those guys are in or out, I'm going to look at a player who's now emerging after missing a couple of games himself. That's Josh Downs, receiver. Now, both Chris and I were big on Josh Downs last season before he debuted. He was really coming along nicely until injury disrupted the middle of his season. And then, of course, everything just kind of went to hell in that Colts offense because, well, Anthony Richardson got hurt and Gardner Minshew just was okay. Like, he didn't quite cut it in terms of fantasy for the receivers. He can't really support them at a high level, which we're seeing with the Raiders. Okay, so Anthony Richardson's out. Again, if Joe Flacco is the starting quarterback, I'm going to be really in on all these receivers. You saw what happened when Michael Pittman finally had a big game. Josh Downs even. 8 catches, 82 yards, and a touchdown. 9 targets on the day, which was the same as Michael Pittman. I really want Flacco to start if you hadn't noticed. But look, even if it's Anthony Richardson, still Downs has been coming on. This is a guy who knows how to get separation. They need to go to the slot in the center of the field because they don't really have a reliable tight end who is a pass catcher. And so I'm in on Downs. And again, if Flacco's a starter, I think I'm starting Downs because just the ceiling is so much higher. And I will say, if Jonathan Taylor is out as well, they're going to have to lean on that pass game a lot more probably than they even want. This is a situation where those injuries, I mean, sure, Trey Sermon benefits, but I think the receivers benefit just as much, if not more. And then another young receiver who has already reaped the benefits of a quarterback change in Carolina, it's Xavier Legette. That's right, Andy Dalton, of course, has revived Deontay Johnson's fantasy value, thankfully. But now we got to take a hard look at Legette, who, again, I talked about him last week. Actually talked about him after week 1. He got a nice air yard share. But with Adam Thielen on IR, Legette is definitely going to be a factor. And we have already seen it because in week 4, the first game without Thielen, 6 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown. And that target share is really high, 10 targets. Only Deontay Johnson had more on this team. This is also an offense that does not have a reliable pass-catching tight end. I know they drafted Ja'Tavion Sanders. It's going to be a while till he is really involved in this offense. So this team just doesn't really throw the tight end anyways. Let's face it, they never have, not since Greg Olsen at least. And then there really isn't another receiver involved enough. Jonathan Mingo does not seem to be happening. Thielen is out, like I said, so Legette is clearly the number 2 target here, and he's getting the targets. And Dalton, of course, he wasn't as good as he was in his first start, but he was still good enough. Now, I will say I don't love Legette as a flex or streamer next week because they have to go on the road to face the Bears, and that defense is legit. So I'm all for adding Legette. Don't know if I want to start him next week, so that might play a factor when deciding who to pick up. Now, another young receiver who's starting to make some waves is Wan'Dale Robinson of the Giants. And now he's got everybody's attention after a primetime game on Thursday night against the Cowboys when he caught 11 passes. But this just, is a continuation of what we've seen already. He's drawing a ton of targets in this offense. And this is what I was talking about in the preseason. I was in on Wan'Dale as a sleeper for this exact reason. I was just going to say, we know Neighbors, of course, is going to do what he does, but they need somebody else to get those short, intermediate dump offs, those easy targets for Daniel Jones, right? It's not going to add up to a lot of air yards, but it's going to be high in terms of volume. That's exactly what is happening. Of course, 11 catches, that's great. Well, it was, 70 yards? Okay, that's not amazing for that amount of catches, so it's not great in terms of yards per reception, but it adds up. And if you're in a full PPR league, double-digit receptions, you'll take that any single day. And this is already his second game of double-digit targets. In fact, over the first 4 games, he's got 38 total targets. That's up there among all receivers. And now Malik Neighbors, possibly with a concussion. I mean, I'm not ruling him out already for week 5, but if he does miss time, just think about how many targets Wan'Dale Robinson could get. Okay, it's probably not that much more, but still, he's going to be involved. He already has been involved. It's not a sky-high ceiling, but look, sometimes just having that floor in a PPR league is nice, especially this year. So many injuries, bye weeks are coming, so I think we've just got to be invested in Wan'Dale Robinson. And he hasn't done it a lot yet, but he definitely could take it to the house. He's got great speed, so once he does rip off a big play, then you're going to see something at least sort of akin to a ceiling. All right, sticking at receiver, Jerry Jeudy is not new on the scene, relatively new though to Cleveland in 4 games. Turns out he might be the Browns' leading receiver this year, because that's what he's been. 18 receptions, 197 yards. They both lead the team right now over Amari Cooper and anybody else they got there. And he didn't bust out in week 4 or anything, but another solid game. 6 catches, 72 yards, and 9 targets to lead the team. Again, Jeudy's kind of flying under the radar here because he's not had a big performance like Cooper did last week, but it's just steady. He is actually proving to have a pretty nice floor in a PPR league. One thing I will just say, the real reason I just decided to mention Jeudy here, because I've not been big on Jeudy, and it's not like anything he did in week 4 really pushes him to the forefront. It's week 5, the fact he gets the Commanders. Now, I know the Commanders actually held their own on defense finally this past week, but still, it's not like this is all of a sudden a good defense, especially their pass defense. Let's take advantage of this matchup. Deshaun Watson, of course, not what he used to be. I don't think that's going to change, but he's at least supporting 2 receivers. Jeudy has been solid, and now we might finally see a big game from Jeudy. So if he's out there still, then I think this is a good time to pick him up. All right, let's finally get to a running back. A lot of people wind up dropping Chase Brown because he had done a lot of nothing in the first 3 games. Don't blame you. I even said it myself. He looks droppable because he was definitely taking a backseat to Zach Moss, and this team just has not committed to the run. Until week 4 when they committed to the run. Now, to some extent, this was game script, of course. They were leading and wound up beating Carolina. So, look, it wasn't a tough matchup. It was a good chance for them to run the ball. But here's what strikes me as very interesting for Chase Brown is the fact that he finally got the same amount of carries as Zach Moss, and it was a lot of carries, 15. I mean, that's pretty good for a timeshare here. And Chase Brown did find the end zone, not once but twice, which is surprising because these weren't long touchdown runs. He was getting red zone work. In fact, Brown's touchdowns were from 3 yards and 1 yard out. Did not think that Brown would be the guy they'd use that close in the money zone. You'd think Zach Moss, being the slightly bigger, more experienced back, would be the guy. Now, Zach Moss did score 2, but again, this is very encouraging for Chase Brown. This is what we were hoping for. This is why we were hiring him as a sleeper throughout the draft process. So maybe it's finally starting to happen. Bengals don't have the greatest matchup next week. They get to play the Ravens, but I will just say this. For Brown, a guy like him, it's not that you necessarily want to plug him in and start him on a weekly basis. I don't think he's ever going to have that kind of upside as long as he is splitting carries with Moss, but he's usable now. And again, you might be in need of a running back for sure week 5 and beyond. So if you did drop him or somebody else did drop him, again, that was totally understandable, but it might be time to scoop him back up. All right, you're definitely going to need a tight end. At least a lot of you will, because again, guys like Laporta and Goddard aren't playing in week 5, and many other tight ends either still hurt or we're just not sure, or they're just bad because they're tight ends. Or if you're streaming tight end, that's probably the smartest move you could have made and just not waste a draft pick. So who is the tight end du jour that will wind up letting us down after a big week? Well, let's go with Tucker Kraft. Now, again, I say this because pretty much every tight end available on waivers after having a good game has done nothing the following week. Cole Kmet this week, right before that, guys like Hunter Henry. I could go on, but look, there's a reason why I'm going to be interested in Tucker Kraft, because first of all, he had his best game, coincidentally, when Jordan Love came back. Jordan Love, well, he didn't look great. I can't say he looked great throwing 3 interceptions and, the team didn't win, but he definitely was able to move the ball. A lot of yardage, got some touchdowns. Tucker Kraft did get one of them. And Tucker Kraft did catch 6 passes for 53 yards. It wasn't just an end zone score. And I already mentioned Christian Watson likely to be out. More targets to go to the tight end position. I was all about Luke Musgrave, during the training camp period. And apparently they're all about Tucker Kraft, this guy who coming back from a pec injury. He missed a lot of camp and he's come back strong. And now he is the leading target at tight end. Musgrave's involved, but Kraft is definitely more involved. But the other reason I'm in on him for week 5 is the matchup, getting the Rams. This defense did not let down this week as expected. So, the Bears didn't wind up putting a lot of points on the board there. Well, maybe this week, at least to some extent, the Packers can do it. Packers put up a lot of points against that Vikings defense. Why can't they do it against the Rams defense? And if you need a quarterback, again, a lot of you will. Guys like Jalen Hurts will be on bye, Jared Goff, and others. So let's just go to the obvious here. If for some reason Baker Mayfield is still out there, it's time to just add him. And you know what? You may just need to stop streaming. At some point, we have to say he's legit now. He has finally found a home here in Tampa. He was good last year. He's been even better so far this year. A quarter of the way through this season now, your number 1 fantasy quarterback in all scoring formats is Baker Mayfield. Coming off another big game statistically, 347 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he ran in another touchdown. That's a couple of scores on the ground here. And that's what I like about him compared to some pocket passers. That's what I said about him versus a guy like Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold has been great, but Mayfield will scramble and run and near the goal line too, and Darnold doesn't. And I know a lot of you are saying Mayfield's not available. How would he be there in my league? Well, he's still out there in about a third of all fantasy leagues, at least on Yahoo and Sleeper, and way more than that on ESPN. So there's definitely a chance. It all depends on how deep your league is. Now, if Mayfield isn't out there, I will just say one more time, if Joe Flacco is starting this week, I would just stream Joe Flacco if that's what you need to do, right? Go Flacco. If Flacco's not starting and Mayfield isn't available, probably my next choice would just be roll with Kirk Cousins on Thursday night. I know a lot of people will say the same thing about teammate Bucky Irving. Look, he is still out there in half of all Yahoo leagues, 40% of sleeper leagues almost. And look, come on, ESPN, what's going on here? Really? Nobody has decided to pick up Bucky Irving here? Now, he didn't really separate himself anymore in week 4 because he had the exact same rushing output as Rachaad White. Same amount of carries and yardage here. All right, but he's the guy who found the end zone. Actually, did it twice. He scored, and then they called it back upon review, and they gave it to him, and he just scored even easier the next time. So 1 touchdown, but still, he's getting the goal line carries. I know Rachaad White's still the pass catching back, so honestly, in fantasy value, it seems like it's about even here. I still think at some point, Bucky Irving runs away with this job, at least on early downs. He's clearly the more effective runner. He's going to get more touchdowns. Just grab him if he's out there. And to check out everything to help you for week 5, check out this week's playlist with start sit advice, our picks to boom, and more.